This video is on the minimum wage in the United States as of 2021. What exactly is the minimum wage? The minimum wage is the lowest amount a business is allowed to pay you per hour. And here in the United States, we have a few different levels of government. And with that, there can be different laws governing minimum wage at each of those levels. So whenever you see this word federal, federal means at the US level. So the federal minimum wage is currently $7.25 per hour, and that has been the same since 2009. This is the last time it was changed. Most states have their own minimum wage that is different than the federal minimum wage. And some cities also have their own minimum wage laws too. Let's look at the whole federal US, or let's look at all the US combined right now. So in 2021, a lot of states changed their minimum wage. I believe about 26 or so. The ones in sort of a pink red changed their minimum wage at the very beginning of the year, January 1st, 2021. And the ones in the darker purple increased their minimum wage in 2021, but just at some time after January 1st. The ones in gray did not increase their minimum wage in 2021. And this is compared to 2020. So, after all these different increases, what does the minimum wage stand at in these different states? So here you go. The dark green is from $12.50 to $15. The light green is from 10 to 12.50. The blue, not blue, the yellow is from 7.25 to 10. And the ones in red basically have the lowest possible, which is $7.25, because that is what the federal or US government says is the lowest you can pay people per hour. All right. So, looking at this, some states already have passed laws where the state minimum wage will eventually get to $15 per hour. So a lot of states pass these laws, and instead of doing the jump all in one year, they were like, it will increase every year by a certain amount. So, for example, in Massachusetts here, our minimum wage in 2020 was $12.75. And then this year, it went up to $13.50 in 2021. So that increased by 75 cents. And eventually, our state is going to get to $15 an hour. The law has already been passed. So that's what these green states are. All right, the gray have no minimum wage laws at all. Okay, one thing for those of you who are paying very close attention, you might notice is on this slide, I have California at $13 per hour for their minimum wage. But on this slide, it says 14. And why is that? Well, California has an interesting minimum wage law where it is different depending on how many employees you have. So in California, as of 2021, if um, if you work somewhere where there are between 1 and 25 employees, then the minimum your boss is allowed to pay you per hour is $13 per hour. If at your job there is 26 people or more, then the minimum wage is $14 an hour. And so that's why they're different in these two different slides. All right, so we have our federal minimum wage at $7.25. Here is the state minimum wage. There are about 45 cities that have a minimum wage that is higher than the state that it is in. The majority of these cities that have a higher minimum wage than the state they're in is in California. As you can see, that's what this CA is. So of the 45 different cities that have higher minimum wages than the state that they're in, about 60% of that is in California. For all the other cities, it's mainly like one city in that state versus California, where you saw there was many of them. Here you see highlighted some of these things in gray, and others are still have that white. I just did this so it's easier to see when it's changing state. So this was Alabama. This is the only city in Alabama. Here are all the cities in Arizona that have a higher minimum wage. Here are all the cities in Colorado that have a higher minimum wage than Colorado does, etc. So in Illinois, Maryland, and then Minnesota. Okay, so that's all those gray colors mean. So like I said, most of these cities that have higher minimum wages are in California. After that, the state that has the most number of cities with higher minimum wages is New York. And then every other state only has at most 2 cities that have higher minimum wages than the state. Okay. One thing I will point out here is of all these cities, it seems the vast majority of them are in democratically controlled states. New York, California, Washington, Oregon, etc. Okay, so you can have minimum wage laws at the federal level. You can have minimum wage laws at the state level, and you can have minimum wage laws at the city level. So what happens if you live in a state where the federal minimum wage and the state minimum wage are different, or if you live in a city where the city, state, and federal minimum wage are all different numbers? What is the minimum that employers are able to pay you? And the answer is basically whichever of those 3 numbers is the highest. So, for example, if you live in New York City, New York City actually already has a $15 minimum wage, which you can see right here. So if you live in New York City, in the state of New York, in the country of the US, then that means that the federal minimum wage is $7.25 for you. The state minimum wage is, I think that was $12.50. And the city minimum wage is $15 an hour. So therefore, since 15 is the highest of those 3, in New York City, you at minimum are paid $15 an hour. Minimum wage laws apply to most workers, but not all. There are a few exceptions to this, um, which is written into the law. And the most common that people are familiar with is people who work for tips. For example, um, waiters, waitresses, etc. So if you are classified as a tipped worker, then your employer is allowed to pay you less than the minimum wage. And every one of these minimum wage laws has a number for tip workers, a minimum that tip workers have to be paid by their employer. And the reason there's this exception is just that in the US, it is assumed that if you are a tip worker, like a waiter or waitress, that you will be gaining some amount of money uh, through tips. Now, for most places, if you're if the amount that you're getting paid uh, via tips plus the amount you're getting paid by your employer is less than the minimum wage, your employer is actually supposed to pay you the difference. All right. Until recently, until August 2015, home health care workers or home care workers actually were also exempt from these minimum wage laws. Home care workers are basically workers who go into homes where there are people who can't really take care of themselves. Often it's older individuals that no longer can do certain things by themselves. Maybe they have a hard time taking a bath by themselves, or moving from their bed to the couch, or whatever it happens to be. Home care workers will go into that home and they will care for those people. And until August 2015, this was one group of workers that were not covered by minimum wage, but now they are. So, um, who is covered by minimum wage can and does change, though not often. The next biggest category that minimum wage does not apply to, that I want to talk about, is independent contractors. And independent contractors, once again, are people who are classified as their own business owner. So they're exempt from these minimum wage laws because since they are classified as a business owner, the person that would pay them is them. So minimum wage laws do not apply to the amount of money that you choose to pay yourself. Okay. I want to take a step back. So I've given you a snapshot of what minimum wage laws look like right in 2021 in the US. Now let's look back to 2012 to see how it has changed. So right here in this map, this is the minimum wage laws at the state level. So at the state level, the ones in green have a higher minimum wage law than the federal government. The blue has the minimum wage law that is the same as the federal government. Red has minimum wage laws that are lower than the government, and then the orange have no laws, minimum wage laws at the state level at all. So basically, other than the green, everything else here had the federal minimum wage of $7.25. And as you can see, it has changed quite a bit from 2012 to 2021. Now, basically, the only areas of the US where the federal minimum wage is still in effect is an area in the South here, a large area in the South, but an area in the South, and then a few here and there. Um, Indiana, Illinois, New Hampshire, Utah, etc. Um, and while many states have increased their minimum wage since 2012, the how much has gone up has really been very different depending on which state you're in. Um, let's compare two that I often compare. Let's compare Florida with Massachusetts. So in 2012, the Florida minimum wage was $7.67. In Massachusetts, it was $8. So more or less about the same, comparable. In the 9 years between 2012 and 2021, Florida has raised their minimum wage to $8.65. So about a buck. 767 to 865, about a dollar. Compare that to Massachusetts, that went from $8 to $13.50, an increase of $5.50 over 9 years. Percentage wise, that comes out to be about 60% increase. In Florida, it comes out to be about 15% increase. So it's minimum wage is changing a lot. In 2021 compared to 2020, in just that 1 year, all these states changed. So this is, I believe, about 26 states that increased their minimum wage just in the year 2021. But just a sort of reminder here, how much it changes by does vary a lot from state to state. All right. Minimum wage. This yellowish green line tells you how much the minimum wage has been in the US since 1938. It used to be that minimum wage would go up about every year at the federal level. Every year they would just increase it. Um, that has not been really the case since about 1980. So if you're looking at 1980-ish, that's right around here. We will go very long periods of time without the minimum wage changing at all at the federal level. These horizontal areas here is just long periods of time or years where the federal minimum wage does not change. Right here, this is 2009, the last time it did change. So not only do you need to look at the number, the minimum wage number, one thing that you need to take into account is how much can that number buy? How much can this minimum wage of $7.25 actually buy when you go out to buy stuff? Because that's the thing that matters the most to you. So this reddish line right here tells you how much the minimum wage can buy. So, for example, this $4.50 says that in 1938, this 25 cents per hour that people were paid could buy the same quantity of stuff as $4.50 would buy you in 2018. So basically, they indexed this to 2018. They adjusted the minimum wage to account for inflation, and they adjusted it to 2018 prices. Okay, so from 2039 to 2000 to, let me try that again, from 1938 to 1968, the minimum wage was going up, and in terms of how much that could buy, that went from being able to buy the same as $4.50 in 2018 to a high of $11.39. So basically, in 1968, this $1.60 could buy the exact same amount of stuff as $11.38 would get you in 2018. So that was basically the high point of minimum wage. And since then, um, like if you go from 1968 to present day, like the minimum wage has gone up. It went up from $1.60 per hour to $7.25. But the thing is it's not going up quite as fast as the price of goods. As you've probably experienced, the price of stuff more or less goes up every year. Uh, your rent, or how much groceries cost, or how much gas costs, how much cars cost, that more or less goes up every year. And although the minimum wage has gone up, the minimum wage from 1968 to now, the minimum wage has not gone up as fast as prices are going up. So therefore, how much you can actually buy with minimum wage has actually been decreasing since 1968. And anytime you have these period of times where the minimum wage goes many years without increasing at all, you you definitely see the amount that that minimum wage is able to buy will decrease. So anytime you have these horizontal periods of time, the buying power of minimum wage always goes down.